Thank you for joining us for Mini-Bite 4 of BC's Office of the Human Rights Commissioner's web-based learning sessions on misinformation. This session focuses on how we can all stop the spread of misinformation. If you haven't watched Mini-Bites 1, 2, and 3, we encourage you to do so. Mini-Bite 1 provides an introduction to BC's Office of the Human Rights Commissioner, offers an overview of all 5 mini-bites, and explains how to use the different components of these web-based learning sessions. Mini-Bite 2 considers how misinformation works. And Mini-Bite 3 explores why misinformation is a human rights issue. During this session, we'll ask you to reflect. So consider pausing this recording and downloading the handout package, which is located beside this mini-bite on our Misinformation Can You Stop It webpage. You can record your reflections in the fillable forms in these handouts. Or you may prefer to have a pen and paper available to write down your thoughts if you find that helpful. In Mini-Bite 4, we will consider ways to protect ourselves and others from misinformation and explore and practice using the STOP tool to identify and stop the spread of misinformation. In this session, we will be sharing specific examples of misinformation to illustrate the strategies used to identify it and stop its spread. Some of the examples target specific groups based on their identity. These examples may bring up memories of harms that you or someone you care about has experienced. Please do what you need to do to take care of yourself during the session. This may include pausing the recording until you feel ready to continue.
Before we share some of the strategies our office has developed to stop the spread of misinformation, take a few minutes to reflect on these questions. What strategies are you using to identify and stop the spread of misinformation? Which of these strategies work well? And what supports would be helpful to you? If you responded, nothing, that's okay. The goal of this session is to provide you with some strategies. You can record your reflections throughout this session in Handout 1. You may wish to pause the recording to download the Handouts package and record your reflections. The Handouts package appears beside the mini-bite on our Misinformation Can You Stop It webpage. As we traveled around the province with our giant cell phone misinformation quiz, we asked members of the public what they were doing to stop the spread of misinformation. While you watch the video, consider whether any of the strategies you use are the same or similar to those of the participants in this video.
I think also it's hard for people to think about all the steps when they're just seeing a post. But I think it's always important to just take a pause before we decide to share anything.
Stopping to think about what you're reading and seeing is so important, especially as we doom scroll and spend hours online. Yeah. I think just reading and getting better at critical analysis is helping me be better at reading and seeing misinformation. And I think sharing that with friends and family and letting other people know how to do that is a great thing to do.
So you need to make sure you have the right source and the right information so people can act upon the correct and verifiable information.
I feel like if you love something and you don't want to let it come across as wrong, that's your duty, right? To provide the correct information and to not be afraid to correct people and to let them know that something is wrong. The best way I feel that I can do right now to protect myself and the others from misinformation is by doing my research. And whenever I come across a suspicious information online or a suspicious type of news, or a friend or a family member sends me something, especially for my family, they get clickbaited and they get brought into this wrong information all the time. I always make sure to ask them, have you checked your sources? Have you done your research? Are you aware that you're sharing something that you're not sure it's entirely true? I feel like asking those questions and making people think before they just hit the button. Hitting share is really easy. Posting something on your stories is quite easy. Make sure to find good sources of information. Make sure to talk to your peers and Be aware that everything that you post on the internet, it will impact somebody's life. If you spread misinformation about something, about someone, this person will know, this person will suffer.
Many of the strategies identified in this video are similar to the ones our office has identified. Before presenting our strategies, we'll review the strategies creators of disinformation use to mislead us.
In Mini-Byte 2, we explored why misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation are often difficult to distinguish from real information. We learned that creators of disinformation use very successful strategies to mislead us. These include modifying information and creating content that looks real, benefiting from social media site processes to reach people with shared values and fears, building on those shared values and associated fears to capture our attention, provoking strong emotions that make it feel urgent to share, and overwhelming us with information so we don't know what to believe. Understanding how mis- and disinformation work helps us to develop strategies to identify it and stop its spread. During this session, we will explore some of these strategies, including actions we can take to limit misinformation that we encounter, identify and stop the spread of misinformation, and protect others from misinformation. In Mini-Byte 5, we will consider another strategy, advocating for changes in policies to make it more difficult for creators of misinformation to mislead us. Because creators of disinformation are so skilled at misleading us, it can take a great deal of time and effort to identify whether each piece of information that we encounter is true. To minimize these efforts, an important first step in protecting ourselves is limiting the misinformation we encounter. We will share 3 strategies that might be helpful. One way to limit the misinformation that we encounter is to use social media in ways that limit harm. Many of us originally started using social media to connect with friends, colleagues, and family members. We also may have used it to build connections with groups with shared interests. By focusing on using social media as a platform to build connections and making a conscious effort to ignore posts that claim to share information, we can help limit the misinformation we encounter. Another way to limit disinformation we encounter is to make a conscious effort to replace social media posts with trusted sources of information. There are a variety of ways to develop a list of trusted sources. You can bookmark these in your internet browser and use these sources instead of social media to find and confirm information. We will discuss strategies to identify a trusted list of sources when we consider the letter T in our STOP tool later in the session. Another way to limit the misinformation we encounter is to include sources that provide multiple viewpoints. Not all news content is objective or fact-based. Sometimes news content is subjective. Subjective content presents opinions or points of view on a given topic. Reliable sources should be clear about whether a news article is intended to express an opinion or not. And often these opinion articles are called op-eds. When consulting subjective content, consider expanding your analysis to include sources that provide multiple viewpoints. For example, if you tend to be in support of increased immigration, consider consulting sources that provide arguments against increasing immigration, and vice versa. We discussed in Mini-Byte 3 that one human rights impact of misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation is polarization or division between different groups. Considering different points of view is an important strategy to counter polarization. Considering opposing viewpoints can also help us to understand a different point of view or strengthen our arguments in favor of our existing point of view. It's important to note that if you have identified a news source as reliable and trustworthy, it doesn't guarantee that every piece of information coming from that source is guaranteed to be factual. but developing a trusted list of information sources will reduce the chance of encountering disinformation and malinformation. To further protect yourself from misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, we encourage you to apply the strategies in the STOP tool, which we will explore on the next slide.
As part of our Misinformation, Can You Stop It campaign, BC's Office of the Human Rights Commissioner developed a STOP tool. Each of the 4 letters in STOP indicates one strategy that we can use to identify misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation and stop their spread. These strategies include S, share only when you're sure. T, track down the truth. O, outsmart the outrage. And P, poke at the point of view. Over the next several slides, we will consider each of these strategies. We'll connect each element of the STOP tool with the strategies used by creators of disinformation to mislead us. And we'll practice applying the elements of the tool to examples of misinformation. The S in our STOP tool represents share only when you're sure. This is meant as a general guideline for interacting with all information we encounter. Share only when you're sure is a response to all strategies used by creators of disinformation. But it specifically addresses the disinformation strategies of creating content that looks real, provoking strong emotions that make it feel urgent to share, and overwhelming us. It can be difficult to take the time to distinguish misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation from real information. But as we considered in Minibite 3, misinformation causes real harms and negatively impacts our human rights. So it's important to slow down and take time to confirm whether a post is true before sharing it. Before we share an example, we'd like to provide a content advisory. We will be exploring an example of disinformation that targets trans and non-binary people. This post, which says, quote, "Has the kitty litter box been removed from the high school bathroom, or do we still need to acknowledge this mental disorder?" unquote, is a sample question from the Misinformation, Can You Stop It quiz. This quiz was part of BCOHRC's Misinformation, Can You Stop It campaign. The quiz provides 4 examples of social media posts and invites you to identify whether they are true or examples of disinformation or malinformation. Many quiz participants were misled by this post. The post looks and feels real, and many people taking the quiz told us that they were sure it was true because they had seen news about it online, or someone had told them that there were litter boxes in schools in their community. This and similar posts reporting that schools were providing litter boxes for students who identify as cats appeared in Canada and the United States. And anti-trans candidates for school board and other levels of government in the United States have shared similar disinformation to support their campaigns. But these reports have been consistently proven to be false. School districts in Canada and the United States have confirmed that they do not provide kitty litter boxes for students, and no evidence of kitty litter boxes in schools has ever been provided. You can find more information about this in handout 2. Considering the impacts of sharing this and similar posts may help us to consider the importance of sharing only when we're sure. Schools have developed accessibility measures to ensure washrooms are accessible to all students and staff. These measures include providing washrooms that are accessible to people using mobility devices, such as wheelchairs and walkers. They also include providing gender-neutral washrooms that people who are trans or non-binary can feel safe and welcome to access. Disinformation about kitty litter boxes in schools ridicules people using these accessibility measures and minimizes the importance of these measures. It may also provoke confusion, ridicule, and harm by wrongly comparing gender identity with the identity of non-humans, like cats. This type of disinformation may have originated from people trying to discredit trans youth. If we share only when we're sure, we can help stop the spread of misinformation that causes harms such as these. Take a minute to reflect on a post that you shared recently. Were you sure that it was true before sharing it? Why or why not? In other words, what did you do to be sure that it was true? Or what prevented you from being sure it was true? Can you identify harms that this post could cause if it's not true? What could you do in the future to be sure that something is true before sharing? You can write the answers to these reflection questions in Handout 1, Question 2. We'll explore the answers to the last question over the remainder of this session.
The second strategy in the STOP tool is track down the truth. Tracking down the truth involves identifying whether the content is true or misinformation. Track down the truth is a response to all strategies used by creators of disinformation, but it specifically addresses the disinformation strategy of modifying information and creating content that looks real by using AI modified or generated images or videos, misrepresenting the context, and misidentifying something as the source of the problem. We examined these strategies in more detail in Mini-Byte 2. Tracking down the truth involves verifying the source, using a fact-checking tool, and consulting reliable sources. We'll consider each of these strategies using an example of disinformation. But before we do, we'd like to provide a content advisory. We will be exploring an example of disinformation that targets immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers. In September 2017, a Facebook user posted, quote, "This is what one illegal refugee gets with the Federal Assistance Program, $3,874 per month," end quote. To support this claim, they posted this photo of what looks like a breakdown of the benefits paid by Immigration Canada's Resettlement Assistance Program, also known as the RAP program. This program offers financial supports to government-sponsored refugees during their first year in Canada. These refugees are legally entitled to be in Canada. Claims such as these can have harmful human rights-related impacts on refugees, asylum seekers, and immigrants. These include provoking anti-immigrant conspiracy theories, discrimination, and hate. They can also impact our ability to make informed decisions, including how we vote. By tracking down the truth before sharing posts such as these, we can play a role in preventing these types of harms. You can find more information about the resources we used to track down the truth about this post in Handout 2. The first step in tracking down the truth is to verify the source. This involves investigating the source of the information and considering whether it is reliable. In this example, the person who created the post provides no evidence that they have knowledge or expertise on the Resettlement Assistance Program. Nor do they explain how they came into possession of the document. Further investigation of similar posts shows they are linked to groups that are advocating to limit immigration. This puts into question whether this post is true. The second step in tracking down the truth is using a fact-checking tool. Fact-checking tools can be used to identify whether commonly shared content is true. One example of a fact-checking tool is Snopes. Snopes is a member of the International Fact-Checking Network. Members of this network have guidelines in place to monitor whether their analysis is reliable, transparent, nonpartisan, and fair. Snopes provides analysis on whether posts are true, false, or unverifiable due to a lack of evidence. It also provides the source of the post and the strategies Snopes used to identify whether it is true or false. If we type the words illegal refugees, government funding into the Snopes search box, it pulls up several articles that Snopes has investigated on this topic. At the top of the list, we find, quote, Do illegal refugees receive $3,874 per month from the government? End quote. According to Snopes, this information is false. While the RAP document appears real, the Post representation of the document is misleading in many ways. Some of these include: the payment is not for one person, but for a family of 5. The people receiving the payment were accepted by Canada as refugees, so they are not illegals. And most of the payments are for one-time resettlement costs and not monthly benefits. This is a clear example of how disinformation, or more specifically, malinformation, works by misrepresenting the context. Another useful strategy to track down the truth is to consult reliable sources to confirm whether the information is true. For example, consider whether the drive for profits is influencing the news you are seeing. And consider whether public or not-for-profit news sources offer more bias-free reporting. For information based on research, such as information related to health or the economy, a list of reliable sources could include government organizations charged with overseeing these responsibilities, and public or not-for-profit organizations. Examples include Health Canada, Statistics Canada, and non-governmental organizations specializing in specific fields. The website Media Bias Fact Check provides an assessment of factual reporting and fact-checking of different news sources. In the case of this example, a reliable source might be Immigrations, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, or IRCC, which is the government agency for the Resettlement Assistance Program. According to the IRCC website, the Canadian government only pays resettlement funds to government-sponsored refugees. It also partially funds joint-assisted refugees, whose funding is also covered by private sponsors. Most refugees in Canada are privately sponsored by organizations such as faith-based groups. And the IRCC website also tells us that the monthly RAP rates for government-sponsored refugees depend on the province, but they are significantly lower for one individual than the amount cited in the post. Let's take a moment to reflect on tracking down the truth. Reflect on a post you shared recently. Did you use any of these strategies to track down the truth? Identify the source, use a fact-checking tool, and consult reliable sources? And can you identify harms that this post could cause if it isn't true? Finally, which of these strategies could you use in the future? You can record the answers to your reflection questions in Handout 1, Question 3.
The third strategy in our STOP tool is Outsmart the outrage. Outsmarting the outrage helps us to recognize feelings that misinformation provokes. It allows us to avoid automatically sharing misinformation that provokes these feelings. To outsmart the outrage, we can pause to answer the questions, do I have strong feelings about this? And are those feelings based in facts? Creators of disinformation benefit from social media processes that send us content related to issues we care about. Disinformation builds on our shared values and associated fears to capture our attention. Then it provokes strong emotions that make it feel urgent to share. Strategies we can use to outsmart outrage include noticing the emotions the post is provoking, acknowledging that these emotions may be intentionally provoked to mislead us, and tracking down the truth to confirm whether our emotional reaction is justified. We'll explore each of those strategies using an example of misinformation. Before we do, we'd like to provide a content advisory. We will be exploring an example of misinformation that targets Muslim people. In June 2024, St. Anne's Anglican Church was destroyed in a suspected case of arson. Many posts like this one appeared on the social media platform X, accompanied by photos of the burning church. The post stated, quote, "Another church is burned down in Canada by some Muslims. Christianity is under attack," end quote. The post rapidly spread on a variety of social media platforms. The creator of this disinformation shared a similar post that unjustly blamed immigrants for a fire in Wales. As of June 2025, officials are still investigating the source of the fire, and there's no evidence that Muslims were involved. The human rights-based harms of this and similar Islamophobic posts include provoking discrimination, hatred, and conspiracy theories against Muslims. Handout 2 includes more information about this post and the sources used to disprove it. The first step in outsmarting the outrage is noticing emotions that the post is provoking. If we believe this post is true, we may experience feelings of sadness, fear, or anger directed towards the group of people blamed in the post, which in this case is Muslims. Noticing these emotions is an important first step in responding to misinformation. Once we've identified these emotions, take the time to acknowledge that the person who created the post may have manipulated facts to intentionally provoke these feelings in order to mislead us. Creators of disinformation know that we tend to react quickly when we experience strong emotions in response to a post. So it is possible they are benefiting from this common response to manipulate us with content that will provoke strong emotional responses. Pausing to reflect on this possibility can help us take control of our actions and prevent manipulation by disinformation. Once we've acknowledged this possibility, it should become possible to put our emotions aside while we track down the truth. If the post turns out to be true, we can accept those emotions as valid and take action with more control or certainty. But if we discover that the post is misinformation, we can choose to not share the post. In doing so, we prevent the harm that those targeted by the post may experience. In the case of this post, a simple fact check will prove that the post is misinformation. Let's take a moment to reflect on outsmarting the outrage. Reflect on a post you shared recently that provoked strong emotions. Did you use any of these strategies to outsmart the outrage? Did you notice the emotions the post was provoking? Did you acknowledge that these emotions may be intentionally provoked? And did you track down the truth to confirm whether the emotional reaction was justified? Can you identify the harms this post could cause if it wasn't true? Which of these strategies could you use in the future? You can record the answers to your reflection questions in Handout 1, Question 4.
The final stop tool strategy is poke at the point of view. Poking at the point of view involves identifying the source and considering whether the point of view of the source may have influenced the content. To poke at the point of view, we can ask the questions, what is it trying to say? Who is saying it? And who benefits from it being said? In Mini Byte 1, we discussed how disinformation is created to meet the specific goals of those who develop it. We also considered how we tend to believe information that corresponds with our current understandings and values. And in Mini Byte 2, we discussed how disinformation benefits from social media processes by targeting people with shared values and fears. Strategies to poke at the point of view include identify the message, consider your own point of view, examine the source, and track down the truth. Let's consider each strategy in detail using an example of disinformation. Ads like this one were posted in transit, newspapers, and on billboards. It refers to liquid natural gas, also called LNG. This ad claims, quote, Canadian LNG exports will reduce global emissions, end quote. The QR code on the ad links to the Canada Action website, which invites website users to sign a petition that calls on the government to expand LNG exports. In response to a complaint submitted by the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, Canada's advertising regulator ruled that these ads are, quote, inaccurate, misleading, and distort scientific data, end quote. Potential harms to human rights from this example of disinformation include limiting our ability to make informed choices and harming democracy through its potential impacts on environmental policies that can have devastating health impacts as a result of climate change. These health impacts include heat illness, increased asthma from wildfire smoke, and anxiety and depression resulting from wildfire evacuations. The first step in poking at the point of view is identify the message. We can do this by asking, what is the post trying to say? In this example, the message stated in the ad is, quote, Canadian LNG exports will reduce global emissions, end quote. This refers to emissions of greenhouse gases, which are known to contribute to global warming. The second step in poking at the point of view is to consider your own point of view. You can do this by asking 3 questions. The first question is, how does the message align with my views? In this example, we may agree with the importance of cutting greenhouse gas emissions and investing in green energy. We may also believe that it is important to grow our economy and create jobs. The second question is, could these views provoke me to accept the message without confirming that it is true? We have already considered how we tend to accept information that is similar to our beliefs and values. If we share the values and viewpoints expressed in this message, we may accept the ad to be true without fact-checking it. Reflection on how disinformation may build on our values to manipulate us into believing the content in the message can help us to pause and consider whether the creators of disinformation are manipulating us. The third question is, could I consider different points of view? In Mini Bite 3, we discussed how misinformation contributes to polarization. This may limit the information we receive and the viewpoints we consider. It can also prevent us from making informed decisions. Considering different points of view can protect us from these disinformation strategies. In this case, understanding the arguments and facts in favor of and against using LNG as a source of energy can help us have more productive conversations on energy generation and climate change. The third step in poking at the point of view is to examine the source. We can begin by asking, who is the source? The ad was created by Canada Action. Canada Action's About Us webpage states that it is, quote, a grassroots organization that encourages Canadians to work together to take action to support our vital natural resource sectors and the communities and families they support, end quote. The Narwhal article that reported on this ad noted that Canada Action received $100,000 from ARC Resources, an oil and gas company. The article also noted that Canada Action is supported by individuals connected to these industries. To determine whether the Narwhal is a reliable source, we can consult the Media Bias Fact Check website. It evaluates the Narwhal as having a left-of-center bias for editorial perspectives, but a high rating for factual reporting. And Media Bias Fact Check gives the Narwhal a clean fact check record. As the information we are considering in this example is factual and not editorial, we can conclude that this article is a reliable source. Now that we have a better understanding of who the source of the ad is, we can ask the question, how might they benefit from convincing us of their message? If a person or organization benefits in some way from the message they are conveying, there is a potential that the message includes disinformation aimed at misleading us. Not all information that benefits the person or organization posting it is disinformation. But if we are aware that the creator of the content benefits from us believing them, it's worth taking the time to confirm that the content is true. In this case, for example, the oil and gas company that partially fund Canada Action benefits from us believing their message in support of exporting more LNG. So it is important to determine whether the content in their message is true or disinformation. This leads us to the fourth step in poking at the point of view, track down the truth. We can do this by using strategies that we presented earlier, such as using a fact-checking tool and consulting alternate sources. In this case, a quick Google search using the keywords Canada Action and LNG ads brings up several news articles from reliable sources. These ads report on the Ad Standards ruling on the Canada Action ad. Let's take a moment to reflect on poking at the point of view. Reflect on a post you shared recently. Did you use any of these strategies to poke at the point of view? Identify the message? Consider your own point of view? Examine the source? And track down the truth? Can you identify harms this post could cause if it isn't true? And which of these strategies could you use in the future? You can record the answers to your reflection questions in Handout 1, Question 5.
We have now considered all the STOP strategies to identify and stop the spread of misinformation. They include share only when you're sure, track down the truth, overcome the outrage, and poke at the point of view. We encourage you to consider using each of the elements of the STOP tool to identify whether a recent post or news content you received was true or disinformation. Handout 3 includes a table with description of each of the STOP strategies. When you identify content that is disinformation, you can enter it in this table beside the STOP strategy you use to help identify it. We've discussed how creators of disinformation are skilled at misleading us. The STOP tool can help us identify misinformation and stop its spread. And the more practice we have at using the STOP tool, the more skilled we become. Consider taking BCOHRC's Misinformation, Can You Stop It? Quiz using the STOP tool strategies to help answer the questions. The link to this quiz appears in Handout 2. Each of the questions highlights one of the strategies in the STOP tool, and the quiz includes many different posts. So you can take the quiz several times and apply the STOP tools to different posts. We've included a copy of the STOP tool in Handout 4. A poster and label-sized versions of the STOP tool are available to download on our Misinformation, Can You Stop It webpage. Consider putting up the poster in a space where you access information online, such as your home, your workplace, a community setting, or a classroom. You can also attach the label to the back of your cell phone. We can use these resources to encourage us to use the STOP strategies whenever we encounter information. During the launch of BCOHRC's Misinformation, Can You Stop It campaign, many participants taking the quiz told us they were confident identifying misinformation. But they were concerned that some family members and others they cared about were more vulnerable to being misled by it. We'll take a minute now to consider ways to help others. We don't have enough time to consider this topic in detail, and there are many resources available on this topic. We've included some examples of this in Handout 2. But we'll briefly present some of the strategies that you might consider using. The mini-bite providing information on this strategy is included in this list. They include 1. Minimize resistance by acknowledging the person's values and fears, which we discussed in mini-bites 1 and 2. 2. Prioritize your efforts by focusing on misinformation that may cause harm. This was covered in mini-bite 3. 3. Avoid blaming by highlighting how creators of disinformation are skilled at misleading us. This was discussed in mini-bite 2. 4. Illustrate the importance of stopping the spread of misinformation by considering how it harms human rights. This was covered in mini-bite 3. And 5. Provide tools by sharing strategies to stop the spread of misinformation, which we discussed in mini-bite 4. Let's take a moment to reflect on the following questions. First, which of these strategies could you use to help other people identify and stop the spread of misinformation? And second, can you identify additional strategies that might be helpful? You may wish to pause this recording while you reflect. You can write the answers to these questions in Handout 1, Question 6. The decision to protect ourselves and others from misinformation is a personal one. It depends on many factors, including how important it is to you, the time available to you to use the strategies, and your own personal safety in engaging in conversations about misinformation. Participating in the Misinformation mini-bite sessions is already an important first step.
In mini-bites 1, 2, 3, and 4, we explored what misinformation is, why we are concerned about it, the strategies it uses to mislead us, how it impacts human rights, and strategies to identify and stop the spread of misinformation. In mini-bite 5, we will consider what we can do in more depth by discussing examples of approaches different groups are using to stop the spread of misinformation. Thank you for participating in mini-bite 4. We can all stop the spread of misinformation. If you enjoyed this session, we encourage you to share it with people in your community or organization who may benefit. We also invite you to download the PDF of this presentation along with the handout package. The handout contains links to sources of information shared in this session, a summary table of the strategies in the STOP tool, and a poster of the STOP tool. The examples shared in this session may bring up a variety of feelings, especially if they reminded you of similar impacts experienced by yourself or those you care about. Handout 5 provides some useful supports.